Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're clicking on this video, obviously it's because you were intrigued by the title, or you know me personally and you're like, wait, what? So if you guys read the title of this video, you know I'm going to be talking about the emergency spinal surgery that I had, which was a microdiscectomy. What is a microdiscectomy? Basically, it's a procedure where they go in very minimalistically, almost microscopic. They use a microscope so they can actually see everything, but they remove part of a disc that has herniated or is bulging and is compressing the nerves on the spinal cord or other nerves. If you aren't in my family or close friend or in my program within my immediate circle, you obviously wouldn't know that I've been dealing with this issue for over a year now. So what exactly was I dealing with? I had a L5S1 herniated disc that was compressing spinal cord. I don't know what it was compressing, but it was sending signals down my leg that were extremely painful. Usually people that have herniated disc to the severity that I did, there was some big cause of it. There's some big trigger. Personally, I could not pinpoint what it was. I have had a very active life. I've competitive danced for years. I don't really know exactly what instance caused this. I think it's important to understand that just because you have pain doesn't mean you need to have surgery. My case, I tried to prolong having surgery for as long as humanly possible. I was not going to have surgery until things changed, and I'm gonna get into that. I started with a personal trainer in October. I wanted to make sure I had all the proper lifting techniques, as well as I'd really strengthened my glutes and my back and my shoulders, and I wouldn't be pulling anything when I was lifting, because obviously paramedics is one of those careers where your back and your glutes play a huge role in your job. Like, you are lifting people and moving certain ways, so that needs to be extremely strong, not to mention your core. So I took it upon myself to get that started. Fast forward to we had COVID and we had so many different lockdowns, the gym kept closing. Luckily, I was fortunate enough that my mom has an at-home gym in her house. So I had been, whenever we'd go on lockdown, I would go continue to train in my mom's gym. Fast forward to March, I started to feel this intense tightness in my right hip, kind of buttocks, glute area. It made moving and bending over extremely difficult. And right away I was like, oh my God, is this my hip issue from years ago finally like coming to smack me in the ass? So immediately I'm like, oh my God, I need to start physio right away. So I go to my family doctor and I'm like, listen, something's wrong. I need to go to a physiotherapist. So she sent me to a physiotherapist. I'm doing physio. From physio, the tightness in my hip was no longer there, but instead it moved down my leg. So now it was in my calf, and it was almost that feeling of like, you know when you get a Charlie horse and it's that tightness and you like get up and you're trying to stretch it out and you just can't stretch it out? So it was that, but constantly anytime I was standing. When I would sit, I was relieved of the pain, like I had the tightness in my hip, but I could deal with that when I was sitting. I couldn't withstand the pain when I was standing. It started progressively and then it continued to get worse, and it got to the point where I literally couldn't stand for longer than 10 minutes at a time without like wanting to cry. There were days that I would like be stuck standing in line and would come home bawling my eyes out and feeling like I'm gonna throw up or pass out because I was in such pain. Physio wasn't helping. I ended up stopping physio because I was like, this has caused a bigger issue. From there, I tried going to masseuse, chiropractic, acupuncture. The only thing I found that helped was acupuncture. Massaging helped like release the tension a little bit, like making my back and everything less tight, but the main issue was still the pain. So I ended up saying to my doctor, this is not getting better. I've now tried all these things. I think we need to do an MRI. And after she like assessed my movement, and at this point, like I couldn't sit in like with my legs straight out and my back straight up. I couldn't sit like that. Like literally I could barely straighten my legs out. So she was like, okay, yeah, obviously there's an issue. So she sent a referral for an MRI. I didn't end up getting that MRI for 6 months after, because of the fact that they were so backed up from COVID, and my referral for the MRI went in June. I didn't end up getting the MRI until December. I ended up getting a job where I was primarily sitting and they paid really good, and I found that that helped. I truly felt that because I wasn't lifting as much, I was helping heal the injury, because in my head I'm like, it's just something pulled, and I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that no, this is an actual issue that you have. During that whole time, I am in the paramedic program, and I've completed my first semester. I was unsuccessful in couple courses, and the reason for why I was unsuccessful was because over time it got progressively worse. So I would be standing, and then I would come home and I would like try to get my muscles to relax, and they wouldn't, and they would just be super tight, and I would be in this intense agonizing pain for hours. And then you're trying to sit there, and I'm trying to study, and I can't because I can't get comfortable. The only way I could like study successfully was if I was sitting crisscross on my bed. It's hard to study in your bedroom. There were like other factors that also went into that. I was working a lot of hours. People in my program would kind of ask questions like, so they kind of knew what was going on, but they were like, how are you able to lift? And I was like, well, as long as I'm moving, I don't feel the pain. It's when I'm standing still. And I have a high pain tolerance. Like, I have a full leg sleeve. I have dealt with more than enough injuries throughout like years of dancing, and I couldn't do the pain in my calf. Like, and I also got annoying over a while, where you're just like annoyed, where you're like, for fuck's sakes, like I just want to be comfortable for once. So I spent a lot of time just laying in bed because it hurt. Or I would go to try to work out, and then I would come home and be like in agony and have to like try to take a bath, and it wouldn't help. Or, you know, I was like popping fucking Robux and ibuprofen like there was no tomorrow. We ended up having the MRI, and I will insert a picture of the MRI here for you guys. So obviously you can see that I have a herniated disc, my L5S1. Basically, she had said to me, okay, we're gonna, no heavy lifting. I'm gonna send the referral to a neurosurgeon, neurologist. We'll see what they say. In the meantime, continue like with whatever you can to try to pain management. I was basically going to a massage once a month. For a while I was going every 2 weeks, and then I dropped it down to once a month, just because I felt like it was getting better. And I'll get into that in a second. I was doing chiro every single week because my chiropractor does acupuncture, and that was the only thing I found that helped. I had stopped doing physio up until a certain point, and then I restarted. At the end of February, I ended up receiving a call from one of the neurologists in where I'm from. I ended up having a consultation with the nurse practitioner, and she was asking me questions. The questions that they're going to ask you if you're going through this whole process is they're going to say like, have you tried this? Have you tried this? So like, they do want you to try physiotherapy. They do want you to try chiro and masseuse. They want you to try different things before they get to the point of surgery. Also depends on like what state you are at. They'll ask you, do you still have control? Like, do you have any issues when you go to the bathroom? What they want to know by that is, are you losing control of your bladder or your bowels? Personally, I never got to that extent. I did have where like I didn't have full sensation in my bladder. They want to know if you have sensation or if you've lost sensation in your leg, because that can be like a sign. Like having pins and needles usually is a sign of compression. I had like slight pins and needles every once in a while, but not really. It would be like if I was in a certain position. And then they want to know like, are you having difficulty walking? And at that point I didn't have difficulty walking. I just had to think when I stepped. Like I almost had to be like, step. Like I had to put more thought into what I was doing, and it didn't simply just come naturally to me. She ended up saying, you know what, you're a good candidate for surgery. I'm gonna have the neurologist give you a call and we can discuss going forward. So within an hour they called me. It was a very emotional day because within that day I found out, hey, you need surgery. This is probably not going to go away without surgery. He basically said, yeah, you're a candidate for surgery. I'm going to schedule you in. I need authorization. He's like, you do have to understand that just because you have the surgery doesn't mean that you won't re-herniate in the future. And I was very emotional. Keep in mind, I'm 22 years old. So I just had spinal surgery at 22 years old. And I think when people say like, oh, I had spinal surgery or I had back surgery, people automatically go to like the extreme of like, oh my God, their back was broken or something. What I had was very minimal, but it's still your back and your spine. So it's not something to be taken lightly. Like once you touch your spine, it's likely you might have to retouch it in the future because now you have weakened the structure, unfortunately. I ended up agreeing to the surgery and went home and was trying to like was calling my doctor. I'm like, I need a referral to another one. Like, I need second opinions. Like, I don't want to just say surgery is the only option and not have talked to other people, not heard that there's other options. I didn't really know what I was having done. I didn't know anything about it. So I was freaking out. Within a couple days, they called me. They're like, you're going for surgery March 2nd. Because I had to wait for another neurologist to see. So I ended up calling them back and was like, listen, surgery on March 2nd is not going to work. I'm still working and walking. I'm very uncomfortable and in a lot of pain, but until this progresses to a point where I feel I need surgery, like that's the only thing I'm going to be able to need, I don't want to do that, and I also really want a secondary opinion. So is it possible for me to put this on hold and then I'll call back and authorize it again? And they were like, 100%, like, this is your back. No, if a surgeon ever gets offended by the fact that you want a second opinion, be concerned. It's your body. My biggest issue with the surgeon in question that was originally going to do my surgery was, number one, I worked in the hospital, so I was able to talk to a lot of nurses. They just had comments of concern or critique to him that made me very worried. And you have to keep in mind, no one's perfect. Everyone's gonna have some type of concern. I was keeping that in mind, but the MRI that I had was 3 months old, and the surgeon never wanted to see me in person. Like, he just wanted to book me for surgery and come in. So I ended up talking to a family friend, and he was like, you know what, Kelsey? Looking at your MRI, yes, it's not the greatest herniation. He's like, I've definitely seen worse. From what you're saying, I would suggest, you know, until you get to a point where you're not able to function, you shouldn't have surgery. So I was still working. He's like, he recommended a physiotherapist that I started going to. She's great. I'm so excited to like finally get clearance to go back to physio and start to like strengthen myself again. He was like, you're still moving, you're still walking. He's like, if it gets to a point where you don't feel that great, then revisit surgery. He's like, I still think you should get some secondary opinions from other surgeons. And then he was like, also, like, there are cases where people can have herniated discs, and through proper therapy and through proper things, the herniation can lessen or even completely disappear. Like, there are stories that surgeons have said, like, we've done MRIs and then come like months later do another MRI and the herniation is completely gone. Like, it's just, you know, like, you can try like inversion tables. I have an inversion table at home, so I was trying that. It helped lessen the pain, but it didn't really relieve the pain. For my case, I personally feel the only way that I would have gotten better was with surgery. They also do recommend, like, if you're heavier, to lose a little bit of weight. I could definitely lose weight, like everyone could lose weight. That was what I had summarized with. From there, I felt like it was getting better. I was able to stand again. I wasn't in agonizing pain all the time, but now the pain had been brought out of my calf, which was what the goal was with acupuncture and everything that I was doing. And we were trying to bring the pain back to more a centralized area. So a herniated disc is obviously in your back, but if you're feeling it in your leg, it's because something is being compressed. So you almost want to move the pain out of your leg and back up to the target area of what's actually happening. By this point, we had gotten it to be back in my back. It was like my lower right side back hip area. The week before I ended up having surgery, I had a really hard time moving. I had a really hard time getting up. Walking wasn't painful. Like, when I would first get up and start to walk, it was painful. But then, like, once I was moving, it was fine. I had found that if I just stayed standing, I was in a lot less pain than like getting up and down. It had almost reversed. And I was trying physio. I was still doing acupuncture. I was still doing massage. And it just, nothing was gonna help at this point. So the night in question, it was the 25th going into the 26th of March. And I'd worked 8 to 4 that day. So I remember I had been like popping like over the counter like pain medication just to try to minimize it and to make it better. So that night it was 2 a.m. and I worked 3 to 11 the next day. I could not sleep. I had been laying there for hours, and I ended up finally getting into a comfortable position, had enough time to like relax the muscles. I'm like, okay, I'm comfortable now. I need to try to sleep because I work tomorrow. So I went to roll over and something popped. I don't know what the hell it was that popped. I think it might have been my hip that popped in and out. And then the pain just rushed down my leg. And then the pins and needles, and I lost full feeling in my leg. And then I moved a little bit more, like, because I yelled in pain, I'm not gonna lie, I screamed. And then it was another, and I wasn't numb in my leg, parts of my leg were numb, but the pain was agonizing. So I'm screaming on the top of my lungs, basically, crying, bawling my eyes out like a little bitch, baby. And I have a high pain tolerance, so usually, like, I would have just tried to suck it up. And I did try to suck it up for a little while, and then finally I'm like, this isn't getting better. Oh my god, like, something is wrong. And I could barely move. So I ended up calling upstairs and was like, my papa ended up coming downstairs, and then my nana came downstairs, and I was like explaining what happened. I'm screaming. They gave me like more over-the-counter medication and were like, just try to sleep. Like, maybe like if you relax, like it'll go away. And my grandparents are very old school, and they truly are like, you don't go to the hospital unless like you have to go to the hospital. I was trying to sleep, and I honest to God think I was passing out in pain. I don't even think I was sleeping. I would like lay there and like be screaming and crying, and then would pass out for like 5 minutes, and then would come back to and be screaming and crying. I end up calling back upstairs, and I'm like, listen, I need to go to the hospital. My papa comes downstairs, he's like, you sure you want to go to the hospital? I'm like, I have to go to the hospital. Like, I can barely move, and this is not getting any better. He reluctantly agrees, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna call an ambulance, because I couldn't move. And I was like, no, because again, I'm in the paramedic program. All of my classmates right now are doing their ride-alongs. There was no way I was going by ambulance, because there was no way one of my classmates was coming into my room and seeing me sprawled out like that, bawling my eyes out in that level of pain, and there was no fucking way they were moving me. I rolled myself out of bed, basically, and screamed my way to the car. Got in the car, I remember screaming at the top of my lungs and thinking, oh my god, I'm gonna pass out as I sat in the car. We went straight into triage, and they assessed me. I had really high blood pressure, which obviously, so I'm in agonizing pain. Of course I'm gonna have high blood pressure. Was not shocked by that when I saw the monitor. And they put us in the waiting room. I think I waited like 30, maybe 45 minutes. We end up going back there, and the nurse practitioner comes back. She's assessing my leg, and she's literally stabbing me with a pin needle. And at this point, I didn't realize how much I had lost feeling in my leg. So I knew I had pins and needles in my foot, and I didn't know how bad it was in my calf, but I knew I had partially in my calf. So she's like stabbing my leg, and certain points I'm like, yeah, like I can feel that, or like little, or she'd be like, do you feel this? I'm like, less. So she's like, yeah, like something has definitely shifted. We're gonna send you for an updated MRI. So they were giving me a Dilaudid, and then I think so I went in at 6:45 in the morning. I want to say around 3:34, I ended up being taken for the MRI. The MRI came back, and the surgeon ended up coming in, Dr. Sharmisa, and he like did a whole assessment. He's like, yeah, you definitely like you've lost like some certain sensation in your leg. He's looking at the MRI. As soon as I saw the MRI, I'm like, that's bigger. That is, because keep in mind, I have studied my MRI at this point. Like, I have looked this shit over so many times. I have shown so many of my friends and had to point out what it is. And not to mention that, like, I also am a paramedic student, so like, we have to know about the back and know about the different discs and the sections of your back. So like, I know my MRI is not the best. So he shows me the other one, and I'm like, that's bigger. And so he's like, oh, okay, let me pull up the other one, and we're comparing, and he's like, yeah, like, it's definitely bigger. He's like, to be honest with you, though, he's like, you are a candidate for surgery. He's like, I would recommend at your age you still wait. So I was like, there's no fucking way that there's no way that I'm gonna be able to go home and this just deal with on its own. And he was like, if you want, we can still try that. He's like, you're 22 years old. I don't want you to think that like surgery is the only option. He's like, again, he like repeated what like I've heard other people say, where herniated discs can completely heal themselves. And at this point, I've been dealing with this since March. Not to mention, I'm going away in literally like 2 months, 20 days at the time that I had this done. I'm going away for 3 weeks. Not to mention, like, how am I gonna do anything? I'm not gonna be able to work, right? So I was like, honestly, I want it fixed. So he's like, are you consenting? He's like, I'll bring in the papers and have you sign. So basically, I ended up signing that I was consenting to the surgery, obviously, and then also that in case of an emergency, if I needed a blood transfusion, they could. So they ended up admitting me. I was in my room by 11:30, slept. They kept waking me up for checking for vitals, obviously, and they had me, and so at this point I didn't really know how bad of nerve damage I had, obviously. So when I got up to my room, my nurse, because my papa went home for the night, obviously, my nurse for the night had said, like, I need to like test to see like if you're able to like go to the bathroom on your own, or if we're gonna need to assist you. And I was like, oh, well, like, I can probably do it on my own. Pulled myself up and walked to the bathroom. That was the first time I realized how bad the nerve damage in my leg was. I couldn't feel my leg when I stepped. Fast forward to the next day, I wake up, the surgeon came in, and the best part about him is he wanted it to be my choice. So he literally said, if you decide, you change your mind, you decide you don't want to do this, he's like, it's okay. And he came in the morning and was like, you still good to go? And I'm like, yep, I'm still having surgery. Like, because now I've realized how bad the damage is in my leg, or like how much I couldn't feel. Around 9 o'clock, they ended up calling for me to go down for surgery. And I was literally standing at the sink brushing my teeth. I'm like, oh, okay, so they get me in a gown and I'm sitting there. They didn't end up actually taking me until 3 or 4 o'clock that evening. I was out of surgery by, I actually don't know what time I was out of, but I know I was in recovery by 6 something. They let me sleep for a little bit because while I was in surgery, I ended up having tachycardia. They ended up letting me sleep a little bit. I was back in my room by I think 8 o'clock. I remember when I woke up in like the recovery room, and they have a blood pressure cuff on you because they're obviously checking your blood pressure, and then they have these like cuffs on your ankles, and they are like, they get tight and then they release, and they get tight and they release, and it's to help minimize the chance of getting a blood clot. And I woke up and the nurse had came over, and I had waited for her to come over, and I was like, can you take the blood pressure cuffs off my legs now? She was like, they're not blood pressure cuffs, they're to like keep the circulation going so like you don't get a blood clot. And I was like, oh, okay, they're really annoying. I was so hot. Anyways, fast forward, they kept me for the day. The next day, my neurosurgeon and then 2 neuro residents, which I think were in the operating room, had came in and checked, and they were like, you're cleared to go. You just have to wait for physio to come and check you. They wanted to keep me for another night just because physio hadn't came to clear me, and I was like, I'm literally up walking, like I'm going to the bathroom by myself. I've been up walking around the halls, like just clear me. So they did. They ended up processing the paperwork and letting me go home. The first couple days I pretty much slept. They sent me home with Oxycontin 2 every 4 hours. The first 2 days I took them how they were prescribed. The third day I went down to 1.5 pills, and then the 4th day I took one when I went to bed, and then one when I first woke up, and then I didn't take any the 5th day. And then ever since then I've never taken them. I was up walking around, like standing in the kitchen, basically dancing the day, like after I got home. The day I got home I was really sore. The only thing that I found that was sore is like the incision site. Everything that I've read says that like the recovery time can be really long and drooling. I don't know if I'm just like a tough cookie, but I haven't had that experience. Again, I have a high pain tolerance and I can take a lot of discomfort. So I was literally on Monday, it was exactly a week and 1 day since I had the surgery. I drove myself to school and went and wrote a test. I'm sure you guys want to see the incision site. It's healed up quite a bit. Yeah, so that's the incision site. It's been a week and 2 days, week 3 days. Yeah, to be honest, I feel great. I feel like a total different person. I have to keep stopping myself from lifting heavy things because obviously you're not supposed to sit for longer than 20-minute intervals, and also they don't want you lifting more than 5 pounds, and then I believe it can go to 10 to 15, and then slowly you work up from there. I feel great. Literally $1 million. Tomorrow I go see my doctor to have the incision site looked at. For me personally, the moment I woke up from surgery, the pain in my leg was gone. And I know for a lot of people that isn't the case. Sometimes they say like it could take months. For me, it was immediate relief. I will say I do have, so I did wake up still missing feeling in certain places. The side of my right foot, my last toe, I don't really have feeling in. Kind of pins and needles sensation when you touch it. I can feel it, but it's like pins and needles. The right side of my calf, the back side of it, I have no feeling. None at all. Like can't feel it at all. But it doesn't stop me from walking. I will say it's a little uncomfortable when I first get up in the morning just because I think the ball of my foot is still, or like around the toe area, still don't have feeling. And you can almost feel the ball of your foot when you're stepping. The thing with the nerve is that could be permanent damage, or over time that could come back. To be honest with you, if it doesn't come back, it doesn't affect my life. I would prefer to have feeling everywhere in my body. For me personally, surgery was the best thing that I could have done. And I'm so glad that I did it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask me them. I tried to answer pretty much everything in the video, but if I missed anything, feel free to leave them in the description box below. I might make a video talking about it, and yeah. Love you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed.